Track 13, Unit 5, Lesson 1, Activity A. Listen and do. Part 1.
Now let's have a look at this fan chart. This shows us global population growth and future projections from 1950 to 2050. As you can see, the median projection is for an increase to 8.9 billion, but there are higher and lower projections too. The highest projection is for 10.6 billion, and this is nearly 50% more than the lowest projection for 2050. We have to hope that this number is very wrong, because the median projection of 8.9 billion is already extremely high.
Part 2.
Take a look now at the pie charts, which tell us a lot about the world's land and water. From this one, we can see the different shares of global surface area for land and sea. We often think of countries like Russia and Canada as huge, but really and truly the total area of land is only 25% of the global surface area. This is approximately a third of the surface area of sea. In other words, the amount of the Earth's surface that is covered by sea is huge, and we humans have to share quite a small part of our world, the part that we call land, with millions of other species of animals and plants.
Part 3.
Let's turn now to the land that is biologically productive, land where plants and animals can live. From this chart we can see the different shares of productive land. Now let's look at farmland. Out of the total amount of productive land, this is just 13%, which seems very low. It's exactly half the area of open grassland, for example. But we need to remember that farmland, which includes intensive crop production, can only use the best, most productive land. And the fact is that we humans already use nearly all of that. So if the population rises to nearly 9 billion people by 2050, we will have to get even more food from that land than we already do.
Part 4.
Now let's look at another chart. Well, we've already seen that fresh water, the water that we can use, is a very small part of the world's water. And here we can see that the amount of fresh water that we can easily use is also very small. That's the active water in rivers and lakes and the groundwater that we can get out of the land. Out of the total amount of fresh water, this is just over 23%. Compare that with all the water in the form of ice, most of it in Antarctica. This is over 3 times the amount of groundwater and active water together, and we can't use it because it's too far away.
Track 14, Unit 5, Lesson 2, Activity D. Listen and read.
As the world's population rises, will we soon face a food crisis? This week, Our World Today has been collecting opinions around the world.
1.
We're already facing a crisis. 30 years ago, we went down 20 meters for groundwater to irrigate our crops. Now the water table is 200 meters down, 10 times deeper. So we're taking far too much from nature, and the water is beginning to get salty. Nature can't go on like this, and nor can we, because after the water turns salty, farming here will disappear.
2. This area used to be grassland, and people here let their animals move round and feed freely. But the rising human population means too many animals, and so the plant cover is all being eaten. Without that cover, the earth is getting hotter and drier, and soon so will the air above. When that happens, the rain will stop, and this land will become desert. 3.
It used to take 40% of our income to feed the family, but now I spend more than half. To save money, we're buying less meat and eating more vegetables. But corn is one basic thing we can't live without, and that keeps going up too. If it gets much more expensive, that'll be a real crisis.
Track 15, Unit 5, Lesson 5, Activity A. Listen and speak. Part 1. Now, Sam, I know that you're very interested in big, new ideas in science to produce enough food to feed the growing world population. But I also know that you're interested in all the many small things that all of us can do in our own personal daily lives to avoid waste and to help save precious resources. What advice can you give everyone watching this program?
Well, yes, saving precious resources, that's the important point. And the first thing for us all to remember is the 4 R's.
What are they?
Well, first of all, we need to reduce. Reduce the amount of resources that we use. We waste a huge amount in our daily lives. We buy things we only use once or twice, and we buy food that we don't eat. It's much better to buy less, to buy only the things we really need.
And save some money too.
Right. And the second R is this. If you buy something that you normally just use once and then throw into the rubbish, think. Can you use it again? Can you reuse it for something different?
I see. So, in other words, we should try to find more than one use for things. What about the third R?
Right. Thirdly, if something breaks, we shouldn't just throw it away. Again, we should try to repair it, and often it's quite easy to do that.
Right. And again, that helps the environment, and it also saves you money. And now, the fourth R.
Fourthly, and finally, we should recycle things which we can't reuse or repair. We still don't want to throw them in the rubbish. Instead, we should try to use the material they're made of to make something new.
So, there we have it. First of all, reduce as much as possible. Secondly, reuse things if we can. Thirdly, repair things when they break and don't just throw them away. And finally, recycle the material a product's made of if we can't do any of the other things.
That's it, exactly.
Part 2. Let's talk about 1 or 2 examples of things we can all do to reduce, and so on.
Sure, there are so many things we can do, and often very simple things. With reducing our use of precious resources, for example, we can remember to turn off the lights when we leave a room. Or again, you can store rainwater to water garden flowers and vegetables.
That seems very sensible. What about examples of reusing?
Well, for instance, keep old pots and cans and use them again to plant vegetables. And here's another example. Take an old ladder, put it flat, add some legs, and put some old bags between the steps. Suddenly, you've made a useful place for storing things. Children's toys, for example.
What a good idea! Have you got any good ideas for repairing things too?
Well, simply think of clothes, for instance. Replace buttons that are missing from old shirts. And to give another example, add new pieces to repair broken furniture. You can mend things such as old chairs and tables, for example.
Yes, those are good ideas if you're good with your hands. And finally, what about recycling?
There are all sorts of ideas. You can cut pieces from old clothes and put them together to make a beautiful bed cover, for instance. Again, you should always save glass jars and bottles to be taken away and turned into new bottles.
Track 16. Unit 5, Lesson 5, Activity B. Pronunciation. Part 1. Glad. Garden. Mend. Merchant. Sit. Shirt. Sock. Sort. Fun. Furniture. Part 2. Bat. Bar. But. Burn. Century. Certain. Citadel. Circle. Fit. First. Packet. Part. Pepper. Perfume. Pot. Port. Stop. Store. Tunnel. Turn. Part 3. 1. It'll be fun to mend the furniture. 2. I'm glad you liked the garden. 3. The citadel is almost a perfect circle. 4. Let's stop at the general store. 5. The merchants brought pepper and perfume.